Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life-transforming while delivering a message of hope.
Thank you for joining us on this week's podcast. The topic that we're going to try to unpack is going to be boundaries, whether they're healthy or controlling or somewhere in the middle. Let's go ahead, and I think boundaries, the first thing I think of is a freeway. How they have guardrails. Right. So a lot of times I think boundaries are intended to be a healthy thing, to keep you within your lane, to keep you from going outside of where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I know we use that in parenting and in relationships a lot. And I think this topic's going to be pretty interesting as we go on.
But yeah, and I think they can be healthy, but I also think that depending on the situation and who you're talking to, it can also be very controlling. Mm-hmm. So you're right. I think we're going to go everywhere with this.
Yeah. I think like just what you said, I think a lot of it has to it's dictated or predicated on the relationship.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because if there's a mutual trust, if there's a love, all of that, I think it would probably be healthy.
Right, yeah.
But I think if there's not trust or there's doubt and there's not quite love there and it's just, not knowing really each other, whoever the two people are in the relationship, that's when boundaries could be questioned.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think of boundaries as points I don't cross or areas I won't cross over to. Mm-hmm. I don't really see them as, my personal opinion, I don't see them as being healthy or controlling. I just think that, it's a line I won't cross. Mm-hmm. It's a line you won't cross.
What would be
when
example?
You refer, my gosh, would be a boundary for me.
What won't you cross?
What won't I cross? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it.
You sounded so convincing.
Altogether, though, because here's the thing, though. Yeah. Altogether is I can't think of, I guess if I want to look at a boundary, would you say like maybe going backwards to my old life, like even like going back to drinking or doing drugs? Mm-hmm. Those could be boundaries I won't cross, right? Mm-hmm. Another boundary I won't cross would be, I guess a boundary for me, I wouldn't be caught by myself with another man, even in my house. It's like, right. I would think that would be very uncomfortable. And I think it's disrespectful. I think it's a boundary I won't cross.
Right. But so those are like personal boundaries for you.
Personal boundaries. But in general, they're points you won't cross. They're like borders, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You won't cross. So I think, I could see, I don't know. Where would you think it would become controlling?
Well, it could be controlling when somebody wants to put a boundary and use it as a means to manipulate you. Mm-hmm. Mm. That's how a boundary could be put. Mm-hmm. Like even in our relationship, when there was times I wasn't thinking right and doing right, I would probably mention or, hey, let's do this, and that, and kind of set the stage of a boundary because I wanted to make sure that I was okay to use the back door and go do something I shouldn't be doing.
So give me an example of a boundary.
No,
that's controlling.
Well, no, it could.
No, seriously.
Let me think.
I'm being honest.
I could use one. So in a relationship, for a guy that tells his wife, you can't do this. So he's crossing her boundaries because we shouldn't do that to any other human being. Like, you can't leave the house. You can't do this. So he's crossing her boundaries. And she never really established any boundaries because she's allowing people to do this to her. That's when I think of boundaries in the sense of controlling, that's how I see it. Parents, for example, that don't really allow their children to do anything. It's like, okay, so have we gone too far with the boundaries? Like, that's how I see it.
Well, why instead of saying them as boundaries, wouldn't you say more that, if in the examples you gave, it's that person's being controlling.
Yeah, but
right? But how does, when it comes to boundaries, the definition of boundary, isn't it like points you won't cross?
Yes.
Right? So how can you compare controlling to boundaries?
Because
does that make sense?
Yeah. But the part where it becomes controlling is somebody's putting a barricade telling you against your will you can't do this.
And it was boundaries. Are they healthy or controlling?
Yeah.
So that's what it was. So the boundaries can be healthy, but they can also be controlling. And do we know that fine line?
Because on the first things that you said, going back to drugs, doing all that, that seems like boundaries are a good thing.
Yeah.
So, but you say it's not good nor bad. I think that they're normally one or the other. They're not just there for no reason.
Right.
There's always a reason they put barricades on a construction site when you're driving through the neighborhood because there's danger there. So they're trying to keep you in a safe spot.
Right.
So boundaries pretty much, like you just said, keeping you in a safe spot.
Yeah.
Their boundaries are placed in line in order to keep you and protect you.
And those are healthy
right?
boundaries.
And healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want, well, I'll throw in a scripture where it says the way to destruction is wide. Many will go. But to get to heaven, it's a narrow road. Very few are going to find it. Well, there's boundaries. They're not physical boundaries, but there's boundaries that don't give you the not that it don't give you the freedom. It's keeping you from being vulnerable to something that's going to hurt you or disqualify you from that narrow road. So boundaries, I feel that at the end of the day, they're always intended for a good reason. But it depends on the person who's implementing them, where their heart's at, if they have an ulterior motive to say, you can't do this, yet they can go do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's where the manipulation comes in.
Yeah, okay. So it could be a heart issue
Well, yeah.
for unhealthy boundaries.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. What would be a good example of another good healthy boundary, like in regards to family or kids? Because we have boundaries for our kids. Sometimes we mention it, sometimes we don't.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy boundary. For me, I believe that this is an example. I don't know. Showing them what they should be doing and then allowing them to go out and make their own mistakes. To me, that's a healthy boundary because, as we said earlier, we tend to want to go fix it for them. And I have an issue with that. Also, I was like, I tend to want to go fix it instead of setting I don't believe that that's healthy. I believe that that's me being controlling. Because when I try to go out there and fix it, I mean, he's an adult kid, like he's 30 years old. Why are you still out there trying to help him when this is something he should be helping himself do? So that's when you cross that line from healthy to controlling, because there was a time when he was little and he needed me there for him. But now at 30 years old, it's like, let him fall on his face. Doesn't matter how many times, let him fall, because like we said earlier, that was God. Let God. Don't try to play God.
Yeah.
And God always gives us room to make mistakes. Like he gives us our self-will, right? And he always gives us room to make mistakes. And we as parents, we need to, give our kids room to make mistakes,
Right.
but we're there, we're present. We're just not going to always be there to keep you from falling.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? Because I think there's,
Well, here's a thought or a question regarding boundaries. Let's just say in the parenting department, if we haven't vocalized the boundaries with our kids and we only snap at them once they go outside the boundaries, are we doing a good job?
No, I don't.
Because that is a thing. Some parents, and I know I've done it at times too, where they cross the line and whoosh, you want to get them and
You expected them to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true. You expected them to know what you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. When that doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but I think being good parents would be best to always reiterate the boundaries that you have for them. But like you said, Mary, earlier, to give them the freedom to choose right or wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, here's what I suggest, but you make your decision.
When they're old enough,
Yeah,
not when they're children.
yeah, exactly.
When they're children, don't give them choices. Just kidding.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're doing this podcast is for the listener out there. And now I want to focus a little bit on the younger generation, because we see a lot of young women or young men getting into these relationships where I don't think they know boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't think that these young individuals, young adults, know boundaries. No one ever talked to them about it. I don't know what happened, but they allow themselves to get into these relationships. And I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past in one of our podcasts, toxic relationships. And but because you don't know your self-worth either, or no one ever taught you, so you allow someone to cross that line with you. So to the young women, if you see that someone is telling you, no, you can't do this. No, you're not supposed to go there. Don't hang around your family, or, isolating you from your friends or your family. There's a reason they're putting this fence around you, and it's not healthy. And I'm just as much as the young ladies, the young men too. If you feel, and we know this, like, I'm just going to put it out there. We know this as young adults. We know we have that weird feeling like, well, but I always go and visit my mom on the weekend, or we can go, and they start saying little things like, I don't think you should, or I really don't want to. And they become upset with you over the insignificant thing, to become upset with you because they know that they got their way. Once they're upset, you're not going to go. Whatever that, if you're going to hang out with your friends, but typically an individual will keep you from everybody because they tend to have issues themselves. But if you don't go and you don't go anywhere, now they've manipulated you into doing what they want you to do. But if you never learn how to set up those boundaries for yourself, someone is going to come and violate that in you. So for that individual out there, and even if you're a little older, like 30 years old, and you're in a relationship, know your worth and know that you can set up those boundaries and say, this line, I won't let anybody cross. I think that's really important for the younger generation, and just people in young individuals in general, because too many people try to take advantage of somebody. I always say, don't let them take your kindness for weakness. But do you know what your kindness is? Do you know where your weaknesses are? So I think that's really important for an individual to identify that, so they won't let anyone, overtake them or manipulate them into doing anything that they don't want to do, especially when they're isolating them from family or friends.
And can I share? I think too, with like in relationships, like boyfriend and girlfriend relationships, a lot of the times too, in a situation like that where they're trying to keep them from going to visit family or spend time with other people or other friends or go out, have them, their time. A lot of it, they put the emphasis back on them. Oh, you know what? You haven't spent enough time with me this week. I've been working, and I need you to spend time with me when you're with them after work, and you're doing things with them. And I think that even prioritizing, we heard yesterday, is put it on a calendar, and make it whatever's first. But know that it's not all about them all the time.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's about you too. You need that space and that time for yourself, and you do need your family.
Yes, exactly.
Don't let anybody talk you out of spending time with your family as well.
Especially if you grew up with that strong, well, I don't know if it's called structure, but that strong family tie. That you already have it and it's established. But then you have this person who's very empty or hurt or whatever, and they tend to don't go around family because they can't be around their family. Well, it doesn't apply to everybody. So I just think that that's very important for our young adults to understand right now.
Or it could be leading to controlling that person.
Well, you're mentioning young adults and the boyfriend girlfriend thing. I think because I don't know, maybe about a week ago, me and my wife went and sat with a couple that's about to get married, and one of the things that they had brought up, because we were just asking how they met and stuff, and they turned around and said that when they were considering being a couple and in the pursuit of being with each other and get married, is that they had a conversation on, okay, can we go ahead and cut ties with people that aren't going to be, you cut ties with people that is not going to be good for us, and I'm going to do the same. And I was just I know that premarital counseling is a thing. And I wonder how different our marriage would have been if I would have went through some of that. I didn't have counseling until after everything started falling apart. But I just thought that was an amazing thing that this couple had thought about on their own, to turn around and make sure that, hey, and one of them wasn't quite sure whether, if there was an ulterior motive. But during the course of time, they both realized that that's the best thing they could have done.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I just thought that was so cool for those that are courting right now or dating. If you want to go to the next level, or even if you want to become boyfriend or girlfriend, you should really communicate on what borders you guys want to have for each other.
Exactly.
So that, you're not a deer in headlights when things start to change and you don't know what's going on, or what parameters you guys have for each other. I think that's a good, healthy way. And you talk through those things.
Yes, exactly.
It shouldn't be demanding,
Do you think it's necessary to have boundaries?
I do.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because of what I said earlier about the younger kids, but I'll also hit on this one really quick, social media. Because boundaries would keep me from giving, let's say you and I are hanging out, Ruthie, right? And I give you all my information for social media. And then now you have basically my life in your hands because you can go in there and do so many things. But if I had healthy boundaries, or if I don't have any boundaries, then I just go around doing it to here, now you can take my information, or here you can take it, and you can log on there and do so many things under my name and still be my face and my name out there. So that's why I think boundaries. For that reason, because we were talking about the youth earlier, the young adults getting into relationships. So I think that's why. I think it's important to have boundaries because you know your worth, and you know you're not just going to hand it over to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And good, healthy boundaries keep you safe.
Yes.
And do you think boundaries are meant for the person who's writing, like making them, or for the person who's receiving them? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, it's probably both. But, just to kind of go back to the first question you had mentioned, is I think for somebody that chooses not to have boundaries, they're going to find themselves in a lot of hot messes because they're just living their life. They don't have to be accountable to no one, including themselves. And then they'll find themselves in a rut. They're going to be calling people the midnight hour, come pick me up. I'm stuck. I can't drive. I'm intoxicated. All these weird, crazy things because they don't see that they're worth anything. That's my opinion with somebody that just doesn't have boundaries. I think if you have boundaries, that means you at least love yourself enough to care about yourself and what kind of life you want to live.
And you know your worth.
There you go. Because otherwise, if you don't have boundaries and let's just say, for example, with you, some guy comes and starts sweet talking you and just starts charming you and all this other stuff. And if you don't have boundaries, you're going to fall for anybody that comes along because of, how they project themselves and saying the things that you want to hear. That's why I think that everybody should learn to have boundaries. And if they don't have any, you better start thinking about them, because if not, you're wide open. You're easy prey.
To just about anybody.
Yeah.
Like if you think about your employment, I've said this a lot to my children, and I say it to people. People see it in you. People see I don't know how. I'm gonna get off the subject really quick, but I'll jump back on. I don't know if you've ever seen a person who's been in a really bad relationship. They tend to get out of that relationship and they go right back into another relationship. And you sit back. I remember hearing this in therapy many, many years ago, that a individual who gets with the person who has domestic violence, right? And that woman is able to get out of that relationship and she finally is free. He just knows how to seek out another woman who will take him. And he's just that he never changed from being that person. And that woman who was in that domestic violence, somehow she has something on her that says, I will take you because I can heal you. And they end up attracting those types of individuals. So I don't know how it works, but if you are that person that's very vulnerable, others see it. And the reason I use a relationship was just for an example, but think about a job. If you get a job, employers know and coworkers know she'll do it. Like she'll do it. She's vulnerable. I don't know what sense that is, but it's a sense that they have. It's like, that person has no boundaries. We can go ahead. We can do this. We can tell her this. We can make her do this. And this person's going to do it. And typically, if you guys, I'm sure you've been around a lot of people, but you'll see that. You'll see it with your friends. You'll see it in your job, in your employment. It's like, how does she allow herself to be taken advantage of? And how did that person know to take advantage of her? But it just happens. It's out there. So that vulnerability is, people just see it. So having boundaries is so important because of that reason.
And I know, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, because I know someone exactly, that's that person.
Yeah.
That she's very vulnerable. She's almost like a yes person to everything, even if it's something, sexual.
Oh.
You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to say these words, but like even prostitute themselves.
Yeah.
Because she's that vulnerable. And a lot of it has to do too, I think, with her self-worth.
Yeah.
That she hasn't, she doesn't believe in herself. She doesn't have confidence.
Yeah.
And it's her way of getting attention and being liked or loved, but in the wrong way.
Oh.
And I know,
And it's sad.
Yeah, and that's an individual that's very broken. If you
Yeah,
want.
very broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other people can see that because once again, she has no boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
She doesn't have any boundaries.
That's
Yeah.
And I know we're talking about relationships right now, but it even goes to like if you have a boundary, and I've done this with my kids, is if you have a boundary and you say, okay, I'm only going to spend this much for a car.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you start looking at what type of car you want and what year that fits that criteria. And then you go on the car lot and you're going to go buy a car. You know, if you don't have boundaries, you're going to walk away paying more for something you didn't want.
Yeah.
And have a payment that you are going to hate because even in that scenario, you did not want to put boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's where I think boundaries, they can roll over to every area of your life. If you don't have boundaries, you're going to be paying more in life. You're going to be exposed to so much. You're going to probably experience shame, be on the verge of depression many times because it's like, why again? Just like you said, why is this happening to me again?
Right.
But I think boundaries apply to every area of your life.
Right.
You know, and if you manage them correctly, it helps you stay in your lane and know what direction you need to go without getting on an exit you shouldn't be getting off on.
Right.
You
That's
know?
so true.
I actually want to bring Ruth in again, my daughter. And even if you want to answer on this, Gio, what do you think, talking about boundaries in our home growing up? You know, I know there were some boundaries that were unhealthy, but what about the healthy boundaries that as parents we set in the home that you can think of and you go back and you think about that maybe you can share with somebody out there that's listening, you know, that have younger children and maybe are afraid to set some of those, you know, healthy boundaries because they're afraid of, how do you say, I guess maybe afraid of losing the relationship with their child or not being loved or liked, I guess you could say.
If I could help maybe put it in a nutshell too, would be what boundaries did you not like that you realize were good for you?
Oh, there you go.
That's really good too.
I think right off the bat, one I wasn't a fan of was like the curfew. I think that was because that's a boundary, right?
Yeah.
Me having a girlfriend, you guys expected me to be home. At first, it was like 10 p.m. when I was younger, like a teenager. And then be home by 10 p.m. And then once I got older, 12 p.m. And I didn't like the fact because, you know, I'm with my girlfriend. I'm the man. I could be out late, you know, and then I'll have to, you know, I wanted her parents to be the one like, hey, be home and no one not wanted her, but like, you know, it's like the typical like, oh, the boy can
Almost
just do
like
whatever.
the roles reversed.
Yeah, the roles were reversed, and I was like, oh, I gotta be home, so I gotta take you home. But I think if I didn't have that boundary on me, she wouldn't have had that boundary on her. And I think our relationship would have escalated a lot faster, and we would have taken it places we weren't ready to a lot sooner than we did. And so that's one I could think of right at the top of my head.
So we'll call you Cinderella.
It felt like it, yeah, because it was like, you know, certain people in the family would make jokes. And I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta go home.
Yeah.
But that's I think one. I don't know about you, Ruth. You agree with the curfew one? Yeah.
And that's great. I'm glad that you shared that one because I don't think a lot of young kids understand the importance of that because everybody thinks it's okay just to be out there all hours of the night. And I know you guys have heard this. Nothing good happens at night out there. And then you guys are younger and haven't experienced much. So you can get in trouble a lot faster because you can be taken advantage of because of your naiveness and whatnot. So I'm really glad that you shared that because it's so important. Parents out there, listen, give your kids curfews. And just show show that's how you show love, I think. Discipline and curfews and setting boundaries.
I think it showed how much you cared for us too, because even if like Jess is out, like say like if I'm out to stay home or if I was on call or something and she went out with her family and she's out late and I'm like worried, I'm like, okay, because she's driving, is she gonna be home safe, you know? And I remember my mom, she wouldn't go to sleep until we all came home. And I didn't know that until later on in the fact my dad told me. He was like, do you know why? There was that main motive and then knowing my mom would be up, you know, until I'm home just because she cared for us.
That's awesome. Moms. We never stop.
And I think, I don't know if it's, I know a lot of times it carries over from our childhood. Like me, I was super disciplined. I had my uncles in my life that were those boundaries for me and stuff like that. So when I had a family, I was a little more eager to have boundaries. But with my wife, her growing up, she was in the opposite, where she could do
I was
whatever.
a wild child, free.
Yeah,
I had no boundaries, no discipline.
Yeah.
Like literally, I don't just say it lightly. Like my parents, my dad would work 3 jobs. My mother was a gambler.
Yeah.
So she, I think at 5:00 in the evening, she'd take off to go play bingo. And I knew I had like from 5:00 to midnight, sometimes even later, because I knew my dad wasn't going to be home till after midnight as well.
Oh, wow.
So I would take advantage of those hours to do whatever I wanted to do. And they would never know. Like even when I was doing the drugs and drinking and everything, they really didn't have a clue of what I was doing because they were hardly ever home. Oh, and so I pretty much did what I wanted, and even when I did stuff wrong, there wasn't really that discipline. And believe it or not, actually, for me, I wish my parents had set boundaries for me.
I bet.
Like literally, I wish they had set boundaries because I could see myself in a different place, and I don't regret, the life that I had, because I know that too, there was things that God's going to, that God uses in my past to help minister to someone else, to either help them or get them, out of the situation that they're in.
Right.
And I can relate to them in certain areas. So I don't regret it. I never blamed my parents for my past or anything like that. Never treated them any different. Like, oh, you did this, you did that. But I do, because I had a best friend at the time, and she had boundaries. She had her mom and dad were present. Even though I had parents that were present, they weren't present.
Right.
And she had parents that were present and loved her, and she had boundaries
Right.
that she couldn't cross. And I longed for that. Like I really wanted to be disciplined, and I wanted to have boundaries. I wanted to have both my parents in my life encouraging me and telling me the right way I should go, and even though my mom would have her conversations and stuff with me, it wasn't the same.
Right.
It wasn't the same.
Well, why I brought that up is because as we began co-parenting our kids, or parenting together, what do you call it? It was a struggle because I always wanted to have the boundaries and have the discipline, but she would always push back on that because the little girl inside of her wasn't used to that. Oh. Although she says that, hey, I did long for that, but implementing it's a tough thing when you didn't have it.
Yeah.
So
But
I
there was
it.
seasons though that it wasn't healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And the discipline wasn't always healthy.
Right.
So there was times that I was in the middle of it a lot, and it got to the point because early on it was bad. So even though it was starting to when it would go, get better, it's those triggers.
Yeah.
That would pop up, and I would think, oh no, we're going down that road again. And I would always stick my foot, in between the situation.
Maybe not. I was thinking about it right now. I know that there was some tough times, but I don't think it was so much the boundaries. It was more the discipline.
It was more the discipline, yeah.
So the boundaries were always had good intentions, and I think those were normally okay. It's just how we enforce the boundaries where it got ugly sometimes.
Right.
And you know what? I know we're about to wrap it up, but because of the childhood that I had, I didn't give my children boundaries. I let them stay at the beach. I let them go out to parties. They were 16 and 17. All I needed to know was, are you okay? And they would check in. It's like, Mom, we're okay. I'm like, where are you going to be at? They would tell me. I was like, okay. And I just wanted to believe that they were always making positive choices. Yeah. So, but because of that, my older son ended up telling me, like, you need to just let me be. When he was in high school, I was going to send them to Texas because they were not listening anymore. They had liked this life too much, and they weren't liking it. They really enjoyed it, so they weren't listening to me anymore. Where they would sneak out. I'm like, why are you sneaking out? You're such a this and that. I let you go. There's no need to sneak out. But it was that he had no discipline, and he had no boundaries, so he was looking for it. And he ended up telling me that later on, as he got older. He's like, Mom, I just wanted you to be like those other moms are like, no, you can't do this. I just wanted to know what it felt like. I'm like, we as parents will never win with you guys. But as we wrap up, if you're a young child, if you're a young adult, learn your boundaries, learn your self-worth, learn your identity, because you will never let anyone trespass in your life once you have you know who you are. Parents, learn to have healthy boundaries with your children where we don't want to keep them locked up, but we also want to know where they're at because we care for them. And kids, this is why we call you. This is why we tell you. And this is why we set up healthy boundaries, is because we truly love you and we want what's best for you. We know that your best friend may know what's best for them. They don't. We as parents do. So we thank you so much for tuning in. And once again, if you have any comments or anything, please look. Just follow us. I don't know if Tony, if y'all have anything.
Yeah, no.
Thank
you.
you.
We'll see you next week.